Welcome to the next segment of Hardcorenomics, Basic Economics for the Free Enterprise. I'm Chris. How often do you ask yourself, is the United States a purely capitalist society? And if it's not, is it actually possible for a country to be one? This is a big question. It's a really big question. Now, it has a simple answer, but it's a big question because it involves many aspects to answer it effectively. The answer is no. No, we don't have a purely capitalist society. We do not in the United States have a purely capitalist society. And I believe the whole idea behind a pure capitalist society um, does not benefit the greater good of that an economy can produce. It's not a good thing to have a purely capitalist society. I do believe you need some government regulation in there for the people, by the people. That's what the government is for. The government is there to protect you, to protect your rights and other things that go along with that. It's there to protect you. So we can't have a fully capitalist society. This whole idea creates problems within the economy. Now, I don't believe that we should have total government intervention, but we should have some government in place to control certain things. Let's talk about healthcare. How can we relate healthcare to this topic? The current healthcare system is in shambles, as I mentioned in a previous post. Insurance companies are not being fair. They're price gouging, they're charging outrageous rates. Employers can't afford these rates, so what are their employers currently doing? Well, they're dropping coverage for their employees because they can't afford to keep the coverage. We have people who are losing their insurance because they can't pay the bills. Premiums are through the roof. So, in a purely capitalist society, we run into these kind of problems in a pure capitalist society. And you may ask why. Well, the answer is really simple. It's greed. Because we have greed, we run into these kind of problems in a purely capitalist society where companies get greedy, or in this case insurance companies, and they stick the, the consumer with the high prices. And that's not fair. So, in regards to the public option, which is now in the bill, and there's been talk that the public option, there's a chance it could be dropped. Now, if we take out the public option, I would like to see the new bill that's going to go through the House and Senate, and what incentive would be in it to keep the insurance companies honest and to keep them from discriminating against pre-existing conditions and that sort of thing. So, what incentives are we going to keep in there to keep them honest? And if they're not honest, what incentive are we going to have in the bill to where you and me, the consumers or the customers, can leave them and go get another policy that gives us better benefits and it treats us right? So we come back to the idea of the purely capitalist society agenda. Um, it's a good idea, but it needs government in it to help it run effectively because the course of history has proven it to be ineffective by itself. The banks or the house market, the current house market, and the banks are a primary good example of the point I'm trying to make here. The banks gave out loans to people who couldn't afford them. Okay? People who knew they didn't have enough established credit to take out these loans, took them out. So we have a situation in which banks and consumers were acting irresponsibly, and that led to a housing market crisis, giving out bad mortgages. So if we had had just a little bit more government regulation, maybe we could have prevented this from happening. You see, these are the kind of problems we run into when we adopt the method of a purely capitalist society that has very little government intervention. It's amazing. I hear people, especially the ones on the right, the far right, make the argument all the time that we don't need any government. Government is totally evasive of our lives. Well, that's not true. Um, Look at the house behind me, okay? Let's give you a primary example of how government works in your best interest and in your favor. If my house is sitting on a mass of land that's being developed, um, before they come tear down my house, they're gonna negotiate with me the owner of the home. They're gonna ask me, do I want to settle for a payment? And if I do nothing, if I totally refuse, then they can get petitions and all sorts of extra things. Now, I'm no expert, I don't know the total terminology, and they can have me removed. They can still tear down my property. But they did the right thing in the first place. They offered me to negotiate. Now it's up to me whether I refuse to whether I accept or not. Um, Now let's peer more into this capitalist society and see what it's really about. The government interference in the free market has a little effect on who wins, has effect on who wins and who loses when it makes such decisions. Okay, that's one quote in here. Because economic activities have externalities, an economy is more productive and people are better off when government pay for or subsidize some activities such as roads, fire departments, education of the young, etc. This is good stuff. And this person who wrote this piece says, and as the number of such activities increase, it moves towards socialism. That's a term that's really been thrown around a lot. And that implies complete government takeover, which is not what we want to accomplish in America. We don't want complete government takeover, but what we do want is we want people to be honest. Towards socialism to continue, in which the government controls all economic activities and direct them in a way that maximizes social welfare instead of economic output. But if economic output is neglected, the long-term welfare cannot be achieved. So they must eventually allow some elements of capitalism, even if the government is actually run by our altruistic people. However, the more government does and the more money it controls, the more power it has, and the more it leads to corruption and in the extreme tyranny, so socialist communist governments can be stable. So, in my opinion, when I read this, and I've heard this in economics class too, I view it as we need a fair balance. We need a balance of government intervention and we need a balance of purely capitalist. And it'll balance itself out in work. Thanks for watching my post. I look forward